one spot.
Sorry, no. Tuesday, can you come down to site
But that's not
this is
illegal.
what we're doing. Nobody said it's illegal.
Yeah.
The ball is in the city's court at this point.
Is it his fault? He's just pushing it.
Good evening and welcome to a whole new season of Opinionators here on Cable 14. It is Jason Farr and welcome once again to the show where there's never a shortage of opinions. Each week our Opinionators deliver theirs and then take to the phones and take to the emails and you deliver yours. And we'll meet our four Opinionators in just a moment. But first, let's get to it. Our first big topic of the new season. It's been called many things. It's been called ganja, it's been called weed, it's been called pot, but to most of us it's known as marijuana. And according to Stats Canada, an estimated 3 million Canadians have used it, and many continue to use it. Meantime, there's lots of marijuana in the news. As a matter of fact, while we were away in July, three big stories. A Toronto judge ruling that Canada's pot possession laws are unconstitutional. The National Post running an editorial recently titled "Legalizing Pot Makes Sense," and there's been a whole lot of small-time drug busts, marijuana busts in rural parts of Canada as of late, especially in July. So our question tonight is this: should Canada finally just get on with it and legalize marijuana? We'll meet our four Opinionators on that topic, take your calls in just a bit, but our first opinion tonight comes from the Chief of Police, and it comes from a show we did called Police Watch last May. We got a phone call from an irate citizen concerned about drug use in her neighborhood, and this is Chief Brian Mullen's response to it.
I don't doubt you see lots of drugs. It is a constant effort for us in regards to drugs. As you're probably aware, we've taken a pretty strong position in regards to marijuana, where some people want to liberalize it and legalize it. Actually, we've taken a strong position in regards to that. We've been actively involved in the schools and working. Our school liaison officers are working quite a bit in our schools in regards to raids and information sessions, and we're the first police service to have a drug diversion program for kids. But we're very, very active actually in regards to drug enforcement. Every year we close down approximately 100 grow operations in this community. We make arrests of hundreds of individuals for crack cocaine, and the marijuana arrests are even greater than that. So we are very, very active in regards to drug enforcement, and it is one of our #1 priorities actually. And if I can just get on my soapbox here for a minute, when you start to hear the government and certain individuals within the community talk about the possible decriminalization of marijuana, that sends a terrible message to our kids.
All right, that is Chief Brian Mullen of the Hamilton Wentworth Police Department, and his comments on drug use, not only in that citizen's neighborhood, but how the police are enforcing it. You heard him say over 100 different grow-op busts a year on average in his reign. And now let's get your opinion on the legalization of marijuana. Should we or shouldn't we? At 905-645-3200 or opinion@cable14.com. Tonight's Opinionators are Loren Leiberman, parent, entrepreneur, and general rabble-rouser. Joe Pavlov is back again this season, a Trekkie, a feminist, a blogger, and in her words, a resident oddball. Jeff Scott, former talk show host, is with us again tonight, journalist and member of Parliament for Hamilton Wentworth, and our guest Opinionator tonight, he knows a lot about this subject, Chris Goodwin, owner-operator of Hamilton's own Up and Smoke Cafe. And we will begin, as always, with you, Loren. Is it time for Canada's government to legalize marijuana?
Thanks, Jay. Well, if only life could be so simple as to just be that black and white, or just be able to answer yes or no. When we suggest legalization, do we mean decriminalization? It's a complicated issue for complicated reasons on both sides. I'm not telling you I'm not going to be taking a position, and I just think we need to outline the parameters a little bit better before we start jumping on to what side of the fence we're on. Legalize it how? In terms of whether you're in favor or against. Decriminalize, what does that mean? I think we really need to delve into this a little better before we just say yay or nay. Sir?
Well, I agree with Loren here that it is a confusing topic to ask, should it be legalized? I would say no. I believe that if a law is bad, that it should be repealed. Legalization implies that the government allows a bad law to exist, but then lets you do it anyway. So my position is that we should tax, regulate, license, and sell cannabis in a completely controlled environment where the criminal element doesn't control the drug trade anymore. And that's my position. That's what I'll be putting forward here today.
I can't even believe that I agree with the guy beside me, because people who know me know I'm about as anti-drug as they come, and pot in particular has affected my life, and I think people in my life who have been potheads, and I think it destroys families. I think addictions destroy families. It's something I've been passionate about over the years, and yet it's true that this whole decriminalization or legalization process needs to be looked at, because as of course we know, alcohol is legal in our society. People count down the days till their 19th birthday so that they can start their binge drinking, where they can start legally binge drinking and not be, it doesn't change the problems that are associated with addictions and with any sort of addictive behavior like that. It just removes the criminal element. And so the criminal element is something half of me wants to agree with, because I think, having it being criminalized, I think discourages a certain segment of the population from engaging in it, and I think that's a good thing. However, prohibition was a bad idea, and we can all kind of agree on that. Probably created more problems than it ever solved. That being said, today I decided to wear my all-hemp wardrobe because hemp is my favorite fabric. So here's another side of things. At one point hemp was illegal, and was that a sensible thing to do? So we'll discuss this in greater detail today. Jeff?
Well, I'll give you the headlines of the two themes that I'm going to be adopting. Number one, marijuana will be legalized, decriminalized, and then legalized, probably in our lifetime, and maybe sooner than a lot of us think. But the other part of that, the other side of that coin, is it ain't going to happen as long as the Stephen Harper government is in power, and you only have to listen to Police Chief Mullins to realize that that is the force, that's the power behind the thinking of much of the conservative government in office now. It will depend entirely on how both Ottawa and all the provinces want to go about legalization of marijuana, because it's a provincial it's an administrative responsibility provincially, but it comes under the federal criminal code. So I don't see any of this happening as long as Stephen Harper and company are in power, but I do see it inevitably happening down the road.
Provincial. It would be like an LCBO.
It would be an LCBO, but it also falls under the criminal code. The current illegalizing of marijuana and other drugs fall under the criminal code. So it would need provincial response. It would need provincial agreements with Ottawa, which means a whole, in my view, a whole practical constitutional change of law, and I don't think that governments are ready to bite that bullet yet.
905-645-3232. Tell us if you want to smoke your dope legally. Tell us if you want to keep being a criminal and do it. Tell us whatever you want to tell us by calling in as the fifth opinionator this evening. I think we should kick it to our expert and let us know where the law is at now.
Well, it's completely 100% illegal. A Toronto judge did rule that it's unconstitutional, and that fallbacks on the medical necessity arguments. Terry Parker, an epileptic from Northern Ontario, originally argued that he was having 100 grand mal seizures a year, 30 pills a day, and marijuana was the only thing that brought him down to about 1 pill a day and virtually no seizures. So most epileptics believe you can, 40,000 people would be saved in Canada every year if people with epilepsy were allowed to use medical marijuana.
Are they not currently?
No, the government forced, courts forced the government's hand on that, and even under the Liberal regime, they did the very constitutional minimum. So what we had is a very defunct marijuana policy, medical marijuana policy, and this new court ruling is a reflection of that the government has still not met the obligation of the original Parker decision. So no, they're not providing medical patients with marijuana. We believe that they're, under the current system, it would be 350,000 eligible patients, and Health Canada signed up 1,700.
Chris,
Yeah.
even though most of our audience would agree on the on the medicinal use of marijuana in so many very valid cases, are you saying in effect, and as I think I'm hearing you saying, that this, if it's 100% illegal now, that by opening the door, we're getting a little bit pregnant on the issue as a country, and that it's ultimately going to come to full term where it will be legalized?
Well, I totally believe it will. It's going to happen one or two ways. Either the courts are going to force the government's hand, in which case Stephen Harper will have no choice. Some believe he could use notwithstanding in an area like this, that he completely adamantly opposes. But they're even trying to force him on a very constitutional minimal thing, which is to have a valid medical marijuana program. And we don't even believe he's going to go that far, which may actually result in the toppling and the ending of prohibition. So we very well might get what we want based on Stephen Harper not following through.
That medical marijuana argument has always rubbed me the wrong way, because every pothead I ever met says, oh, well, I need it because I get headaches, or they'll just
But that is true. I think all marijuana is medical.
Alcohol will numb your problems as well. Or, you know, you can take other illegal drugs. I'm sure crystal meth will knock that, problem you have right out of the water. Like, it's just a line that a lot of people use because they want to smoke their dope.
There are a lot of serious medical conditions where doctors are suggesting that marijuana is easing.
But also, no one's saying that just to smoke their dope. You mentioned the argument that the criminal element or the criminal prohibition actually persuades people from not using. So, but I don't believe that's so. I think anybody that wants marijuana today, I can pick up marijuana from 10 places a block from here.
You run in different circles then. But just to be fair, you have a community that you're familiar with. I straddle the line. I have friends who are like, or I had friends, I suppose, who were potheads, and I also work like in the school board system where people are quite law-abiding or whatever, and I find certain people, and I do know certain people who, like for instance my friend who's a jail guard, she said there are certain behaviors she would never engage in because it would cost her job if she did.
Of course.
Full stop.
Do any of you guys buy the chief of police's argument at all, though, that to even talk about decriminalization, let alone legalization, opens the door to an awful lot of problems that the police just don't want to deal with?
No, I believe the chief is being irresponsible in those statements, and I believe he knows it. But I think he has a vested interest in continuing to get more personnel, more cop cars, new photo radar technology to go into grow-ops, and I really do believe that he's scamming the public into.
It isn't just Brian Mullins. It's the whole association of police chiefs across the country.
I think we're linking too many things together. Shutting down illegal grow-ups has very little to do, from a police perspective, in terms of public safety, to do with marijuana, and has a whole lot more to do with fire prevention. The grow-ups that are being shut down are illegal hydro situations, are bad wiring, and are burning buildings. And public safety, whether it's about marijuana, whether it's about alcohol, whether it's about anything, should be paramount and the first obligation of all our emergency personnel. And a lot of the busts come to their attention because of their unsafe operations.
And some of them are unsafe, but every grower I know takes safety as a paramount issue in regards to growing cannabis. Any little neglect there, like you mentioned earlier, would have the fire department come and police come, and you would be caught. It doesn't make any sense.
That's what I'm saying. The ones
wait a minute, back up the truck. You said the growers you know take safety into consideration when they're growing cannabis.
Absolutely, as the highest priority.
The highest priority of the growers that I knew was to keep it hidden. It was to do it like to put the tin foil on the windows, or to find a house that had been abandoned, or to do it in a cornfield or whatever. It was
those people would also grow coffee. It was illegal. They would do anything indoors to make money. They're clearly bad people. Those are scumbags that you know.
Wow.
Seriously,
Yeah.
They really are, because they're trying to profit off an illegitimate marketplace.
They were growing their own supply because they were potheads. They needed it. They wanted a vast amount of marijuana that they could smoke for their personal use. Or you know what, you're right, this is where we're getting into dealing now. Jeff mentioned about the police. What exactly do they have on their hands with regards to the criminal element? Well, we've got dealers in schoolyards. We've got, how do you test somebody who's impaired when they're driving? That was an excellent point.
That's the RCMP road sobriety test. You ask somebody to touch their nose, count to 10, walk a straight line.
But there's no test, like a breathalyzer style test.
But there shouldn't be, because cannabis, it doesn't follow the same parameters as alcohol. At 0.05, somebody's 3 times more likely to get an accident. At 0.07, they're 10, and at 0.08, it's 15 times more likely again.
Okay.
So we've decided as a society that is clearly unacceptable. But the Australian studies and the U.S. studies on chronic cannabis users have found that we are actually better drivers than our sober counterparts. We actually give 15 meters between each car more distance than you would give. I am 10 times less likely to pass, and I also drive 7 kilometers an hour slower than the average person. So
my ex used to say that I'm a better driver stoned than I am.
But the scientific
sober.
studies prove it.
Aren't the arguments that we are mounting right here and now, though, the same ones that they must have gone through with the introduction of alcohol, or whether alcohol should or should not be legalized? It was legalized, for better or for worse. It is perfectly legal to buy alcohol. I know something about alcohol because while I've never gone near marijuana or any other drug of that kind, I am a 35 to 40 year veteran of practically single-handedly drinking Canada Dry, and I'm hastened to add, though, that 1 week from today I'll be coming up to 14 years of sobriety off the bottle, but that's another story. The thing is that the addiction took hold, and it is a very serious matter today as we speak for people who cannot handle alcohol. The question now is, do we compound the thing?
But there's no addiction with cannabis.
I was trying to explain this earlier, and that is something that your generation, Jeff, has been very successful. And I don't necessarily want to clump in a generational thing here.
No.
But gateway drug and addictive drug, that's just lies. That's plain old lies. And behaviors become pattern forming. That's not the same as addiction. And marijuana smokers smoke marijuana, but that doesn't mean they need to the same way an alcoholic or someone who's addicted to tobacco. Correct?
Absolutely. Chemical dependence is an actual, it can be tested and studied and verified. Marijuana doesn't contain any chemical dependence on the body, which, when removed from usage, has the user to go through withdrawal. It just doesn't happen.
Let me ask you this from the point of view of someone who had an addict in my life and hated every minute of it, and I used to say to him, why do you have to smoke dope every day? Why do you need to impair yourself every single day? Why do you need to feel that way? What's so wrong with reality that you have to be stoned? And that's a loaded question, I realize. But an alcoholic I can sort of understand has perhaps a physical addiction that they need to conquer. But if you're saying marijuana doesn't have that same physical addiction, what the hell's so wrong with reality that you have to alter it?
The answer is that as a human species, we're actually very creative and very insightful, and we actually look for ways to alter our consciousness and find other...
caffeine.
Well, there's hundreds of ways, right? It's when the society around us is telling us to look at things as a one-book philosophy, one way, people tend to find ways around that and tend to explore other realities. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, no, there is. Case in point is the children of addicts will be the first people to tell you.
The children of addicts are only harmed because of prohibition.
No, I'm a child of an addict, and growing up in an addicted household has a pile of problems that have been documented from
what does that have to do with marijuana, though?
If you have an addict for a parent, if
I
you have
understand
a
that, but
for
I
a parent,
could grow up with a gambling addict for a parent. It's going to be pretty terrible too. Addictive behavior has nothing to do with legalizing marijuana.
Fair enough. Fair enough. My anger for marijuana runs deep, and I don't mean to pick on you,
I
but
can imagine it would. Your boyfriend or whoever it was probably spending vast amounts of money. He was probably losing a lot by getting it on spot, not paying debts, and violence associated with it.
The other problem was just it was a shady lifestyle, and you know, because interestingly enough,
I've never lived the shady lifestyle.
You're out in the open. You're like, here it is. I'm opening a storefront, etc.
That's right.
The average person that I know who is smoking dope or growing it for their own supply and needs to make enough money to grow their own supply, sells a little on the side. Suddenly you're in a drug dealing situation. Suddenly,
well, that kills me inside when I hear things like that, because that's the vast majority of all my friends as well, which is one of the reasons I disassociated from my high school friendships after getting into activism, was that they continue that lifestyle, that criminal element, the fear, the keep hiding, code words, things like that.
Well, somebody's making money out of all of the illegal sales. I mean, as responsible as you may be, Chris, and the people that you associate with, and the whole principle and the theory and the ideas that you have about getting this thing out into the open, somebody's making a hell of a lot of money.
Well, guess what? I had a hard time getting nail files onto a plane that I took to Vancouver in December, and yet, you know, kilos of, I think the new thing is opium, are coming into ports in Canada from Afghanistan, and there's nothing we can do to stop it, obviously, because, yeah, it follows the money. There are people behind that, and that's why when I talk about people in regards to addictions and police services, jail, they have a vested interest in continuing prohibition. Right now, you know, 80% of all arrests are for marijuana in regards to drug offenses, and in regards to the simple possession of marijuana.
Clogging up our courts, clogging up our jails. If you take marijuana off the streets of downtown Hamilton, you won't see a difference. You won't. You take the emphasis that the cops put towards marijuana enforcement now and put it towards something else, you will see a difference. Absolutely.
Getting down to your basic premise, which is that what happens regardless about people using drugs, which is that I think that the first step is to legalize cannabis and repeal prohibition.
And then with crack.
No,
we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah,
Okay.
I actually do believe that. But the next step would allow us to have an open discussion with children as well as young adults and adults. I think the answer is the way we've chastised tobacco smokers. The rates went from 30 down to 15%. They're half of what they were 10 years ago. Now it's not commonplace. If I was to light up a smoke here, even though they did 10 years ago in studios like this, now you all would look at me like I'm an evil, you know. So that's what we really should be doing, is that if drugs and the abuse of certain drugs are bad for society, then we should treat them like that. Allow campaigns to result that show that that's the result. But at the same time, teach people responsible usage. We don't do that today. We don't say to somebody...
This is why the whole idea of legalizing marijuana under the same, and selling it under the same principle as liquor, through the LCBO, through a marijuana outlet or whatever, is fine. But I think, too, we've touched on it, what does it lead to? If you open that door with marijuana, which for medicinal purposes...
All right, with that question, we'll ask you, what would it lead to? 905-645-3232. Should we legalize marijuana in this country? That's our debate tonight with our four opinionators. Guest opinionator Chris Goodwin is joining us, the owner of the former Up and Smoke Cafe in downtown Hamilton. You know that story. He drove all the way from Toronto tonight to speak to you about this topic, so give us a call, 905-645-3232, opinion at cable14.com. There's more opinionators on the topic of legalizing marijuana after this.
No, I don't think so.
It's very controversial. I think there are benefits to it. I think there could be much worse stuff for people, but I think at the same time it could be used as a gateway drug. So I think it's possible income maker for tax base.
Well, I think it can lead to other things, and I think it can lead to people depending on it. They have a hard time dealing with their money, paying for things that need to be paid for. It can affect their life, affect their memory. There's a lot of things.
I would say probably not, but I can't give you anything behind that.
Well, it's been banned in the States. It's been banned. Well, it's not legal here right now, so they must have good reasons for doing that.
All right, rather than me sending that reporter with the microphone to your house and asking you the question point blank and then bringing it back here and doing the whole edit thing, let me just give you the phone number, 905-645-3232. Call now. Should marijuana be legalized in this country? It's the topic tonight on this, our first show of a whole new season of Opinionators. 905-645-3232 or opinion at cable14.com. Our Opinionators tonight, former MP Jeff Scott. We've got our feminist blogger back, Joe Pavlov, guest opinionator Chris Goodwin from the former Up and Smoke Cafe in downtown Hamilton. And we'll start it up again with you, our festival friend, Loren Leiberman.
Thanks, Jay. I want to make something clear. I don't smoke drugs. I certainly don't wish my child to smoke drugs. It's not a part of my life and my existence. However, I do respect the opportunity of non-illegal behavior for something that I view to be not up my alley, but still somewhat harmless. And Jay, thank you for the bit of a plug. It is the Festival of Friends this weekend. This is all tied in. When we have 40, 50,000 people in the park watching one act, if the cops are smelling marijuana, they know we're in good shape.
That's absolutely true.
100% true, and that's what the police tell me. The more marijuana we smell, the less fights there's going to be, the less pushing, and the less drinking, or less problem drinking. That's what we are, from a security point of view and from a general organization point of view. And obviously I'm not suggesting that the Festival of Friends or any other event in town is a giant pot-smoking situation. But when you get people together, good behavior is associated with marijuana usage as opposed to drinking.
So then the fear comes, which is that the arguments that are brought up is that the gateway theory, obviously, then it could lead to other things.
It's a question that we have to ask. If you pursue the legalization of marijuana to its final end, as I believe it has to be, okay? Same as alcohol distributed through provincial outlets.
Yes.
What then on earth is to say that you have not opened the door to the sale, distribution, legal or otherwise, of crack, of meth, of all of the other,
nobody's going to
of all of the other drugs. Well, I'm just asking the question. I'm saying that because if you do it for the stuff you smoke up, when do you start legalizing and distributing the stuff you shoot up?
I think right away. I think absolutely right away. Sam Sullivan, the mayor of Vancouver, for instance, has been asking for a Section 56 exemption from the criminal code to allow Vancouver to supply the heroin addicts on East Hastings with a legal supply of heroin or an opiate-based substitute. What that would do is it would lower the crime rates in Vancouver's Lower East Side dramatically. It would allow them to become functional members of society without having to engage in the criminal element. I don't necessarily believe that addicts should be snorting pure cocaine or injecting pure heroin, but the reason they are is because manufacturers have designed it in such a way to be as small and compact and as pure as possible. In the regular sense, for instance, coca leaf has been used for thousands of years. It used to be in our Coca-Cola products and was distributed and advertised as being a refreshment and a medical relief after a day at work. The cocaine has been taken out, but the coca leaf taste is still in there. But same is true for a lot of other illegal drugs today. Most people probably wouldn't choose to put a needle of pure heroin in their arm if they had the choice, and very few, and 0.001% of people will ever do such a thing, regardless of any law preventing them from doing it. So I think we should help those people. They are the most vulnerable in our society. They're the ones seeking out the most harmful substances, and we should be there to protect them, not to harm them, not to jail them and throw them in prisons and strip searches and an over again cycle. The gateway theory, though, also doesn't apply. For instance, the new UN studies suggest that Canada uses 4 times as much pot as any other industrialized nation, including the Netherlands, which uses around 3.5%, and we are upwards in the range of 18% now. If it were true that cannabis led to harder drugs, we would see obviously a sharp rise in hard drugs use, which isn't the case. It's down in the low ranges of 0.2, 0.4, 0.5, maybe 1.2%. But just as a final thing, is that in 1907, before the first ever prohibition of any drug ever existed, was the 1908 Opium Act, there was between 0.4 and 1.2% of the population would use hard drugs, would seek out various substitutes, including pure cocaines or harder opiates. So,
but they're more readily available now.
No,
in a way. From 1907, like, you don't think with the way that the drug trade through Colombia or whatever makes its way through the U.S. government.
Now,
no, but I mean drugs.
But there was opium dens in 1907, all throughout Vancouver and Toronto.
Yeah, absolutely.
Until the 1908 Opium Act came out, which was actually a racist law that prevented only the Chinese and Japanese but allowed white distributors to sell opium in the bottles that they sold it in. So marijuana in the United States was the same way. It was all a racist policy to go after the Mexicans and the brown-skinned people of the South that were bringing in the cannabis. So, and that racism is lasted till today, and there is still a part of our society that sees drugs in that, way. So,
sure. It's a class issue too. Now you find that, it's the seedy side of life. It's the seedy part of town you have to go through.
That's a terrible stereotype.
It is.
I think you're absolutely wrung,
really?
And I guarantee you that probably a whole lot more of your coworkers than you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, no, you're right.
And I would dare to venture, I haven't been at those parties, but I sure know about them, that there are very elite and well-to-do residents and citizens of our town and many other cities that have Saturday night parties, and the stuff is passed around.
Would you call that a recreational use, though? Like
it's recreational use, but it's passed around. It's an illegal drug, but it's passed around, yeah, very freely. And I'm.
You're right. You're right. I do know of these.
I'm not going looking. I'm not going looking for it. As I say, after a 35-year experience with one addictive drug, I'm not going to go
and again
and try something else.
In the same boat as you, Jeff, because in my life, the addict in my life was a daily pot smoker, and it was an all-consuming ambition to find the pot, to grow the pot, to sell the pot, and that's hard. We've gone into addict territory. But you're saying like a party and somebody's passing a joint around, or almost like
you're not
almost
looking
like a
at
glass
the
of wine.
Yeah, but you were talking about the seedier side of life.
That's the side that I perceive, and I know.
Well, that's the stereotype.
I agree.
And I've been to some of those very high-end parties too, with high-end surgeons, doctors. My ex-wife is a registered nurse, and as well as some of the people we know in our society, but including MPs and various other things, and judges and teachers and professors, and it's all the way down the line. But cannabis is one of those things that in that environment, the way I was mentioning tobacco, now you can never smoke a tobacco cigarette in that environment. People you will be shunned.
Yes.
But if someone lights a joint, it's almost cool. It's almost, you know,
you're a rebel.
And sometimes the people might not even smoke it, and he might not if he was at the party, but you know what, he might actually grab it and just pass it to the next person.
Maybe because it's illegal? Do you think that's why it's cool?
But that's the question I want to pose. That if little Timmy on the playground, does he yearn for alcohol because he knows it's a buzz, or does he yearn more for marijuana because it's cool and outlaw behavior and illegal? And are you
is illegal till you're 19. So
any forbidden fruit is going to be a come on to the younger crowd.
But there would be an age restriction on cannabis use as well, if in fact and when it becomes legal.
Absolutely.
There would be, just because we don't give things to minors in general.
Yeah.
But is it less salacious and less interesting if in fact it's a legalized product that the beer store, the liquor store, the cannabis store?
I would say probably not, but I can't give you anything behind that.
Well, it's been banned in the States. It's been banned. Well, it's not legal here right now, so they must have good reasons for doing that.
All right, rather than me sending that reporter with the microphone to your house and asking you the question point blank and then bringing it back here and doing the whole edit thing, let me just give you the phone number, 905-645-3232. Call now. Should marijuana be legalized in this country? It's the topic tonight on this, our first show of a whole new season of Opinionators. 905-645-3232 or opinion@cable14.com. Our Opinionators tonight, former MP Jeff Scott. We've got our feminist blogger back, Joe Pavlov, guest opinionator Chris Goodwin from the former Up and Smoke Cafe in downtown Hamilton, and we'll start it up again with you, our festival friend, Loren Leiberman.
Thanks, Jay. I want to make something clear. I don't smoke drugs. I certainly don't wish my child to smoke drugs. It's not a part of my life and my existence. However, I do respect the opportunity of non-illegal behavior for something that I view to be not up my alley, but still somewhat harmless. And Jay, thank you for the bit of a plug. It is the Festival of Friends this weekend. This is all tied in. When we have 40, 50,000 people in the park watching one act, if the cops are smelling marijuana, they know we're in good shape.
That's absolutely true.
100% true, and that's what the police tell me. The more marijuana we smell, the less fights there's going to be, the less pushing, and the less drinking, or less problem drinking. That's what we are from a security point of view and from a general organization point of view. And obviously, I'm not suggesting that the Festival of Friends or any other event in town is a giant pot-smoking situation. But when you get people together, good behavior is associated with marijuana usage as opposed to drinking.
So then the fear comes, which is that the arguments that are brought up is that the gateway theory, obviously, then it could lead to other things.
It's a question that we have to ask. If you pursue the legalization of marijuana to its final end, as I believe it has to be, okay? Same as alcohol, distributed through provincial outlets.
Yes.
What then on earth is to say that you have not opened the door to the sale, distribution, legal or otherwise, of crack, of meth, of all of the other
Nobody's going to
of all of the other drugs. Well, I'm just asking the question. I'm saying that because if you do it for the stuff you smoke up, when do you start legalizing and distributing the stuff you shoot up?
I think right away. I think absolutely right away. Sam Sullivan, the mayor of Vancouver, for instance, has been asking for a Section 56 exemption from the criminal code to allow Vancouver to supply the heroin addicts on East Hastings with a legal supply of heroin or an opiate-based substitute. What that would do is it would lower the crime rates in Vancouver's Lower East Side dramatically. It would allow them to become functional members of society without having to engage in the criminal element. I don't necessarily believe that addicts should be snorting pure cocaine or injecting pure heroin, but the reason they are is because manufacturers have designed it in such a way to be as small and compact and as pure as possible. In the regular sense, for instance, coca leaf has been used for thousands of years. It used to be in our Coca-Cola products and was distributed and advertised as being a refreshment and a medical relief after a day at work. The cocaine has been taken out, but the coca leaf taste is still in there. But same is true for a lot of other illegal drugs today. Most people probably wouldn't choose to put a needle of pure heroin in their arm if they had the choice, and very few, and 0.001% of people will ever do such a thing, regardless of any law preventing them from doing it. So I think we should help those people. They are the most vulnerable in our society. They're the ones seeking out the most harmful substances, and we should be there to protect them, not to harm them, not to jail them and throw them in prisons and strip searches and an over again cycle. The gateway theory, though, also doesn't apply. For instance, the new UN study suggests that Canada uses 4 times as much pot as any other industrialized nation, including the Netherlands, which uses around 3.5%, and we are upwards in the range of 18% now. If it were true that cannabis led to harder drugs, we would see obviously a sharp rise in hard drugs use, which isn't the case. It's down in the low ranges of 0.2, 0.4, 0.5, maybe 1.2%. But just as a final thing, is that in 1907, before the first ever prohibition of any drug ever existed, was the 1908 Opium Act, there was between 0.4 and 1.2% of the population would use hard drugs, would seek out various substitutes, including pure cocaines or harder opiates. So
but they're more readily available now.
No,
in a way. From 1907, like you don't think with the way that the drug trade through Colombia or whatever makes its way through the U.S. government.
Now,
no, but I mean drugs.
But there was opium dens in 1907, all throughout Vancouver and Toronto.
Yeah, absolutely.
Until the 1908 Opium Act came out, which was actually a racist law that prevented only the Chinese and Japanese but allowed white distributors to sell opium in the bottles that they sold it in. So marijuana in the United States was the same way. It was all a racist policy to go after the Mexicans and the brown-skinned people of the South that were bringing in the cannabis. So, and that racism is lasted till today, and there is still a part of our society that sees drugs in that, way. So,
sure. It's a class issue too. Now you find that, it's the seedy side of life. It's the seedy part of town you have to go through.
That's a terrible stereotype.
It is.
I think you're absolutely wrong,
really?
And I guarantee you that probably a whole lot more of your coworkers than you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, no, you're right.
And I would dare to venture, I haven't been at those parties, but I sure know about them, that there are very elite and well-to-do residents and citizens of our town and many other cities that have Saturday night parties, and the stuff is passed around.
A recreational use, though, like
it's recreational use, but it's passed around. It's an illegal drug, but it's passed around. Very freely. And I'm.
You're right. You're right. I do know of these.
I'm not going looking. I'm not going looking for it. As I say, after a 35-year experience with one addictive drug, I'm not going to go
and again
and try something else.
In the same boat as you, Jeff, because in my life, the addict in my life was a daily pot smoker, and it was an all-consuming ambition to find the pot, to grow the pot, to sell the pot, and that's hard. We've gone into addict territory. But you're saying like a party and somebody's passing a joint around, or almost like
you're not
looking
at the
wine.
Yeah, but you were talking about the seedier side of life.
That's the side that I perceive, and I know.
Well, that's the stereotype.
I agree.
And I think some of those very high-end parties too, with high-end surgeons, doctors. My ex-wife is a registered nurse, and as well as some of the people we know in our society, but including MPs and various other things. and judges and teachers and professors, and it's all the way down the line. But cannabis is one of those things that in that environment, the way I was mentioning tobacco, now you can never smoke a tobacco cigarette in that environment. People you will be shunned.
Yes.
But if someone lights a joint, it's almost cool. It's almost, you know, it's...
You're a rebel,
yeah, and sometimes the people might not even smoke it, and he might not if he was at the party, but, you know, he might actually grab it and just pass it to the next person.
Maybe because it's illegal? Do you think that's why it's cool?
Well, that's the question I want to pose. That if little Timmy on the playground, does he yearn for alcohol because he knows it's a buzz, or does he yearn more for marijuana because it's cool and outlaw behavior and illegal? And are you
booze is illegal till you're 19. So when you're 17,
any forbidden fruit is going to be come on to the younger crowd.
But there would be an age restriction on cannabis use as well, if in fact and when it becomes legal.
Absolutely.
There would be, just because we don't give things to minors in general.
Yeah.
But is it less salacious and less interesting if in fact it's a legalized product that the beer store, the liquor store, the cannabis store, three-way split?
Yep. I totally believe it is. One of the main examples I first learned was Mark Emery's, he told me a story about his 3 kids. He has 3 adopted children, and he's the prince of pot, obviously. He has 20 different kinds of cannabis around him, ran the Toker's Bowls. But one of the things he mentioned was that none of his children ever used marijuana on a regular basis, and one of them actually said that, was asked the question, why not? Your father's the prince of pot. And he goes, why would I do something my dad does? That's not cool. Like, and it was one of those things that it was around, most people were using, no one, obviously we're all activists, so no one ever paid any attention to it in any, shocking sense, and it just became one of those mundane things for his children that they never really moved into. So I see the same thing going to be, and the same thing is true in Amsterdam, where most people, if you talk to an Amsterdam teenager, it's the hippies in the cannabis cafes drinking their mint tea and smoking blunts, right? And so it's really not cool anymore, and that's the thing, that's the positive example we should really be teaching if we don't want to teach and allow children to use drugs, is that the abuse of certain drugs or the abuse of certain actions is, look at you, it looks horrible on society and it looks horrible on yourself.
I have a very vivid memory. About 10 years ago, my sister and I lived next door to a park, and the neighborhood kids used to come over and use our musical equipment, whatever, sing in the microphone. And I remember I was talking to one boy. He was probably about 12, and he was telling me about his dad, and I said something like, he was saying something was wrong with his dad. Maybe his dad was in jail. I can't remember. And I said, what's wrong with your dad? And he went like that. He made the gesture. Because even at the age of 12, he knew you don't talk about it. You don't call it by name. You don't say it out loud because Dad might get arrested if you say it out loud.
That's right.
And it was a really creepy feeling for me to see this kid who I related to as like a child of an addict or whatever. But and I really, my heart went out to him. But it had to do with the legality of it, I guess, more than the addiction side of it.
Absolutely.
The kid knew that talking about it out loud was wrong. Whereas you could talk about your dad drinking, no problem, with your friends. Doesn't have the same fear that the cops might.
I still have to come back to the political realities, though, that our legislators are facing. And while we can make eminent sense talking about, the reason that we should see it decriminalized and legalized down the road, and a lot of what you say, Chris, is, as I say, very responsible and eminently sensible. But try to get that across to the vast majority of any member of Parliament's constituents, particularly in the more conservative parts of the country. And I'm sorry, guys, you will not see marijuana or anything else legalized, any of these other illegal drugs legalized, decriminalized maybe, but not for a while, but not legalized for a month, for a long time.
Every year, less, it shifts. There are more and more members of Parliament who smoke dope, and who certainly did smoke dope in their youth.
Sure.
And less people remain as our lawmakers and decision makers who are fearful of what they did not experience, and for the most part were too old to be a part of the culture that wasn't suitable for their generation. And more that president after president now has marijuana experience.
That's right.
You're never going to elect another American president who's never smoked a joint.
That's true. That is true.
You can't go backwards, so it is coming.
Oh, yeah.
And even within the conservative ranks, it is coming. I've seen, certain members that express certain values that are similar to mine. But for the most part, you're right. We're never going to see it.
I'm looking at it realistic. I guess I'm just trying to take a very realistic, hard-headed look at whether we'll see this 10 years, 20 years,
I say
30
it's
years
18 months
down,
away.
down
Do
the
you
road?
really?
I really do. I think we're coming on to a fundamental shift in our worldview, first of all. Going to the United States mention, which is that George W. Bush is out in 2008 of November, and I think that's going to create a major shift in the way we look at foreign policy, the way we look at interventionism, the way we are fearful of creating our own and having our own sovereignty as a nation.
Just to touch on if Canada legalizes pot, can you imagine the repercussions with the U.S.?
tourism
There's going to be no...
tourism
would be fantastic.
And now the dollar is even, which is Niagara Falls is right now scammering,
Yeah.
going, we can't get Americans
Yeah.
over, right? They used to be able to get, double their money, and now it's rare that they can.
But what I mean is the Americans have such a, their anti-drug laws are so...
Yeah, but that's only at the executive branch. In most cases, within the government itself, like you said, there is not one person, a president ever, that's going to not smoke pot again. So we are getting there, but at the executive level, they can't really do very much.
As someone who cross-border...
We're their biggest trading partner. They get 50% of most goods through us. So and as well as all our natural
We get all our
resources.
guns from them, so...
I say they can keep their guns and we keep our pot.
As somebody who's cross-border shops a lot, I know that they're tightening up at the border for various reasons. The least of which is terrorists come through Canadian borders.
That's also
and now
not
it's terrorism and pot.
Sure, but Joe, if the Americans don't want pot coming into their country, they have the right to rip cars apart to ensure to that.
Yeah.
It's their country.
But you know what they really want? I'm going actually to the Security and Prosperity Partnership in August, and George Bush is coming, and obviously they want to create the North American Union. They want a borderless North America, and then they want Canada to follow their drug policy, as well as all the other economic policies that would completely cripple Canada in a lot of ways. They have a lot of lower standards in regards to beef and lumber and various other, that we would now lower ours to meet theirs. It's an insane policy, but you did mention, they don't want pot coming into their country.
No, they don't.
but they also want to extend America in past the 51st parallel. So they want to make I think the Amero is going to be the new money that they want to create. This is all being planned right now as we speak.
The North American dollar.
The North American dollar, the Amero. Canadian sovereignty is going down the drain, and I'm going to Ottawa.
That's a little bit of fear-mongering, that no European nation, being part of the EU, has lost its
But no, as well as, I've always believed that if Canada was ever beside any other EU nation, we would have legalized pot today. It's because we're beside the United States that we don't.
That's a fair point.
Well, you've just proved my point, Ben, that politically it's still going to be
so I say we vote
it's going to be a long road to hoe here. I think it's going to be a long battle, Chris, because the Americans under Bush or under whoever replaces Bush, right off the top, I don't think that Obama or Clinton, whichever one is new president, is going to...
Down to both.
Well, Ron Paul for the Conservative Party, or the Republican Party, I'm sorry. He used to be Libertarian in the 80s, but he's been a Republican Party member for 17 years in Congress.
He's the one who wants no United States Postal Service, isn't he?
That's right. No, he's going to get
it all gone.
Whoever the new Democratic president isn't going to change public opinion or the law enforcement opinion in the States any faster than we are up here.
It might remove the stigma of Canada regaining its sovereignty and allowing us to just dictate our own policy.
Let's head to the phones for the first time tonight. Our first call is Jim. Are you there, sir?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, please go ahead. Jim, go ahead.
Hello?
Yep, you're on. Go ahead, please.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Hi, Jim.
Hi. I was listening to your program, and I think it shouldn't be legalized.
Okay, how
But
come?
I think if you do get arrested for it, like for minor possession, I think you shouldn't be charged. But if you get caught for like a large amount, then yes, you should get arrested for that. But marijuana, it's not that bad. It's like Loren was saying. It's like it's when you're at a party. It's different from when you're drinking heavy.
I guess this is...
Well, then why shouldn't it be legalized, Jim?
I think if you legalize it, say the government charges $100 an ounce, you can always have somebody else that's going to charge cheaper, and it's going to be more powerful, and they're going to go for the cheaper price.
Is that the difference?
Just like the cigarettes and alcohol back a few years ago.
But you know what, though? that same argument could be made that I could start up a distillery in my bathtub at home and expect people to be buying my gin. No, I don't.
It's a good point.
I don't think if the government's going to do it right and you know you're getting safe, quality product, why else would people go elsewhere? I think it puts the bad guy and the independent grower out of business.
Absolutely does. And it'll cripple organized crime in a lot of ways, where 90% of their profits are through.
They'll just go somewhere else.
They'll just do meth and crack.
I disagree. I think with 3 million Canadian pot users and only a few, tens of thousands or thousands of hardcore drug users, it really doesn't benefit them to continue.
There's other ways to make money.
I'm sure there are, but it would also, it would cripple them for many years to come in regards to their most lucrative financial.
Sure.
Can I ask?
Jim, thanks for your call, by the way.
Can I ask with just clarification, the difference between decriminalization and legalization?
Okay, decriminalization, it's weird, because decriminalization should, as a term, say removing the criminal element, or decriminalizing. But in Canadian society and American society, it's become a term to say a fine system.
Oh, okay.
So basically, you would still be arrested. Anything under 30 grams, for instance, you would receive a $205 ticket that would be paid to the province, for instance.
It's what our caller Jim was saying. That's
not a criminal offense.
That's right.
For a small amount, a recreational use amount of marijuana, you don't throw the guy in jail.
But it's actually the very worst of all policies, because it's what we actually call the net widening effect, where if you arrest somebody for a simple possession charge, or even possession for the purpose of trafficking, or trafficking, regardless of the amount, that takes on average about 4.5 hours per officer per arrestee. But when you move into a fine-based system, you can do it every 4.5 minutes. In which case you could go up to people at parties, at the Festival of Friends.
Ticket or whatever.
It would be like that under the Highway Traffic Act. They would just basically, it's as simple as give me that, here's the $205 fine, go on your way. And like a speeding ticket, if you were pulled over, you tried to resist, you could be arrested for other things, and various other things could happen.
You're watching the Opinionators live here on Cable 14, and our question tonight, should marijuana be legalized in this country? 905-645-3232, opinion at cable14.com. We could use you to opine with 15 minutes more to go on our live show, so call now, 905-645-3232, opinion at cable14.com. More on that subject right after this.
It shouldn't be legalized. I wouldn't think so.
They should do it. It's grown on the earth. Why shouldn't it be legalized? Everybody else does it. Why not?
I'm not for it. I'm afraid that kids will try it and then want to try something stronger, and that could lead to problems. I don't see a big problem with marijuana, but I realize too that there's a lot of crime involved around marijuana, so there's pros and cons.
Probably should be. Probably should be.
Why is that?
Not sure it's as harmful as people think it is. If you legalize it, you might be able to tax it, control it. That's it.
Just an amendment to the one young lady out front of Fortino's. Yes, it does grow on the earth, and not everybody. Just 3 million people, according to the latest studies, give it a try now and again. We're talking about marijuana, and should we legalize it here in Canada? 3 million is a big number, and that number, according to Chris Goodwin, our guest opinionator tonight, is growing. We have only about 10 more minutes to go on the show, but time for you to call in your opinions at 905-645-3232 or opinion at cable14.com. So let's get right to it. Loren.
Thanks, Jay. Well, I think we're not getting the right message out. There was a clear little difference here that the kids are saying legalize it, and with the exception of the last guy, there seems to be a real generational split here. The reasons why the older generation, in my perspective, what they're saying, what they said on those Men on the Street interviews, was gateway drug, kids will get involved. Kids will not be able to go to the cannabis store and buy pot. And kids can get pot today, so that doesn't come into play. And this gateway stuff, there is only one true gateway activity. From the time you wear diapers, everything goes bad. So it starts with everything leads to everything.
I understand the gateway argument. I also see why people roll their eyes when they hear it. But the fact is, when you engage in certain behaviors that deal with addictive you know, a slot machine is a gateway to the blackjack table or whatever. It's true. It is true. If you get into something that it is an addictive behavior, you might get into something that's more addictive or worse or cost you more or get into crack. Every person I know who ever got into a harder drug started with pot, and sure enough, prior to the pot, started with alcohol.
Can I ask a naive question, I guess, from the point of view of one of the older generation who has never had experience with marijuana or any of the other so-called illegal drugs. When it comes to the dollar value of these drugs, how much more expensive is marijuana, picking up a supply of marijuana, than, say, going to the liquor store?
It's a few thousand times. In regards to harder drugs, it's 17,000% increase from the point of production to the point of sale. Now you can imagine why people would, you know, the criminal element wants to be in control of that market.
Maybe what he means is if you want to drink a six-pack of beer every evening, that'll cost you $10. But if you want to
the reason it costs you $10, for instance, okay, let's go to the beer model, because I did this as an example about a month ago, is that the average 26er of whiskey or rye is actually about $3.43 at the production level. Now you add the Ontario excise tax, you add the sun-dry tax, you add the whatever, you had the bottling fee.
What's the bottom line for a 26er now?
It's about $19.50. So it goes from about $3.50 to $19.50. And the reason we do that is because we've realized that alcohol should be sin taxed, that there are problems associated with its use, liver damage, various other things, domestic, auto, various. So those.
So if they legalize marijuana and put a sin tax on it,
I don't believe in a sin tax of cannabis.
But say it was a comparable tax to the
comparable taxes, federal provincial taxes on cannabis. If they sold it legally, what kind of dollar value are we looking at?
Well, cannabis is 200 an ounce now. They believe it would be about 20 an ounce in a legal environment, which would bring in about $15 billion a year, and we'd get about $2 to $4 billion in taxes, depending on how that was how the taxes.
Sorry, currently it's 200 an ounce, but you say it would be 20 an ounce.
No other plant, even exotic, the ones you look for in regards to eating, smoke, whatever it may be, cost any more than $20 an ounce. It just doesn't make sense. The cornfields and the tobacco fields of Ontario, for instance, could easily produce all the pot necessary for all of North America. So, yes.
You can get high real cheap, I think, is the answer to your question.
I didn't realize that either. Like
So it's very cheap, absolutely.
But the big money comes in the illegal, in the drug lords or whatever who are making the money on that.
Well, it's because there's a risk premium associated with it, right? You can demand that high of a price in the marketplace because you could get arrested for selling it or trading it. But one of the things he mentioned too is getting back to our message is off. Is that a lot of people aren't aware of the fact that this affects every Canadian, down to every street, down to every. Unless I used to be saying this years ago, that unless you want King and James to become like Jane and Finch very soon, we better end prohibition. And as soon as the Up and Smoke Cafe got shut down, and I did 4.5 months in prison, the gun rate started escalating very dramatically around the James and King area. So
we have a caller, Brent. Can you get in on this discussion here?
Good evening. Yes, please. Thanks. I'll go about it this way. I'll tell you I've been a chronic marijuana smoker for the better part of a decade. I have 2 children. I have a full-time job. I pay my bills. I obey, pretty much every other law out there. You want to tell me why I should be thrown in jail? And that's what, it's from my perspective, and I'm going to try to keep. I applaud the young man in the blue. I don't know your name. I'm sorry, but do you notice how eloquent he is? Do you notice how informed he is?
He is a professional activist, by the way, though.
Okay, well, I will try to represent then us so-called potheads. I'm a university graduate.
Brent, let me ask you, what difference would it make to you if marijuana was legalized?
What difference would it make?
Yeah.
Well, I guess the main difference would be I'd be contributing taxes to the government, which I'm not doing now. Main difference, as long as I can get it unharassed, there's no difference in my mind. I'm going to continue to do this behavior, whether or not the government's going to be on board with me. In fact, there's a certain element, like you guys had touched upon it earlier, that forbidden fruit. This is a very political statement for me. I think I smoke this just so I can get into this conversation with the social network I'm in.
Yeah.
Because I just want to, I just want to illustrate the absolute absurdity of it. Because, when my daughter reaches a legal age, just an arbitrary age that some other person set, she can buy as much alcohol as she wants, goes to her friend's cottage and can consume it all and die. Okay? She can die. But if she found in my stash all the marijuana I own in the house, she could burn it all and fall asleep. Wake up the next day and get on with her life.
So you're saying it's safer than alcohol?
I think it's just so absurdly obvious. This debate to me is just
wanted to
about
get you on the
control.
record.
It's just about control. There's people out there who do not want to give that control up. The law enforcement agencies, whoever it is who's benefiting from this ban, this prohibition, they don't want to give it up.
Brent, we're running out of time. I appreciate your call, and those are some wonderful points. And I think you might have taught Joe here a lesson. He didn't sound like some sort of degenerate scumbag.
You know what I found amusing?
Chronic dope smoker.
The way he started it was, I have a good job, and I have kids, and I pay my taxes. And a child pornographer could say the same thing. A lot of people who engage in illegal activities, whatever they may be, however your moral code might define it, illegal or immoral or not, doesn't mean it's not.
All right. Thank you, Brent, for the call. Thank you, Joe, for the final comment, and Lauren for the comment before, and Jeff, and our special guest, opinionator tonight, Chris Goodwin, who left Hamilton doing 4.5 months in the big house for what went on at the Up and Smoke Cafe. You heard him speak tonight. Maybe we'll have him back again real soon, right here on the Opinionators on Cable 14. Jason Farr, it's great to be back for this whole new season. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for your calls, and especially thanks to our volunteers. Good night.